recording. So, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thanks for joining. So, I'm looking at the agenda doc. Here, maybe I'll share my screen. There we go. Cool. So maybe I'll look through action items from last time real quick. I was supposed to email Devless about a release working group. I did not do that. So I'll carry that over to this week. Oh yeah, G. Had you had a chance to reach out to the folks at Lyft at all about gRPC?
Yeah, I did reach out. I need to reach out to a different person because the one that I talked to don't have experience on that.
Okay.
But he gave me another contact I can talk to. I'll reach out to the other one and see if we can get a response on that.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna just move that up here so we remember to check in about that again.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool, thanks for doing that. And I'm going to move this one for Zhitao up as well, so I'll remember to ask him about that. And it looks like, I imagine you noticed, but it looks like Piresh chimed in, so he might be a useful resource as well on gRPC stuff.
Yeah, I'll chat with Piresh as well on this.
Cool.
Just a short question. So what is the context about the gRPC user experience?
It's more about performance. Like I think like some are concerned about what's the performance in a large scale deployment because it's not something that Google use internally as far as we know for gRPC. So we are curious that what will be the performance implication on using that, given that we want that thing API layer to be performant. And we want to ask Lyft if they have such data since they're a heavy user of gRPC.
Got it. All right.
So is it accurate, G, to say that right now we're just kind of confirming that gRPC is a good direction to go in?
Yeah, I think I heard about some of the feedback about gRPC where people saying that the tail latency is pretty high in some circumstances. And I just want to confirm with Lyft like what kind of production issues they have seen so far when using gRPC. Like, is there any tail latency issues, things like this?
Cool.
Like P9999, like latency, things like this.
But at the same time, so right now we kind of just use it to call a couple of local services without much concurrency or even load, presumably, right?
Yeah, but this is intended for like using gRPC for the entire Mesos API, not just the CSI related stuff. This is for like, imagine in the future all the scheduler API, all the operator API, all the event stream is going to be based on gRPC.
Awesome.
It's like more like kind of due diligence to make sure like we understand the performance implication before we go all in that route.
Cool. So we can take a look at the agenda for this time. First item was added by G, talking about return codes, HTTP return codes. Do you want to chat about that, G?
Yeah, so give you guys some context. The reason I put that is because we are trying to program against some of the operator API that we have. And then we find out that right now, if the routes is not set up in Lyft process, like for example, during agent startup, like initialization, Lyft process layer is going to give you a 404 not found. And also some of the API endpoints, operating API endpoints actually give 404 for some of the cases where like the resource actually cannot be found. And that causes issues because right now, if the client receives a 404, it cannot really tell whether the resource is actually gone or not. because we do have another situation where we return 404. I think like there's a couple of kind of suggestions for that. So either all the API endpoints, when the resource actually is not available, it's gone, then maybe we can return like 410 or 409. I don't remember what's the status code for like resource gone. I think it's 410.
410.
410, yes. So either we return 410, so that we can distinguish, if the client receives 404, its lib process layer is not being set up yet. Does not necessarily mean that the resource is actually gone. So the client should retry. And if the client gets 410, then it know, the resource is gone forever. I know for a fact that the resource has been deleted, and I don't have to retry anymore. Right now, just like unfortunate that we have like 2 cases where we got 404, and the client don't know whether it should retry or not.
So you're proposing that we use the 404 for the case where lib process is not initialized yet?
Well, I think like there's like 2 options. Option number 1. So when lib process is not initialized, we return like 503, as suggest in the tickets.
Yeah.
It's unavailable right now. You should not. You should retry. Basically, it's a temporary error. And for the resource not found case, we actually return 404. So if we do that, it's pretty clear, because when the client receives 404, it knows for a fact that the resource is not found, and it don't need to retry, because in the other case it's a 503 unavailable. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is the process still return 404 for not found if the route that in the HTTP request is not found. But for the actual resource gone case, we return 410 for all the API endpoints, all the operator API endpoints. So these are the 2 options that I can think of right now.
So if we're going to return a different status code in this period before lib process has been fully initialized by the library consumer, wouldn't we need some way to signal to lib process that an initialization is complete?
Yeah, so we probably need that. Are you saying like we don't retry the request until we saw the lib process layer is up and healthy? Like have a signal for that?
Well, I mean, since so lib process starts up and then routes are just added dynamically by the library consumer.
Yeah.
So if lib process is going to return.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? So lib process is a library, so you can dynamically add routes. So whenever you find a route does not exist, does not necessarily mean that it won't be there in the future, because people might dynamically adding routes to the process layer. Like return 403. The problem with return 403 is you cannot really tell whether this is like a temporary error you can retry immediately or like after a short period of time. You don't really know, because it's just like a library. So it's program.
However, we do this basic amount of initialization in the main CPP file, right? Before like we inject everything to the main actor of the process. I think there's probably a place where we could like in the main method somewhere to flip the toggle to suggest to the process that it's ready, right?
Yeah. In practice, we just add a bunch of routes, and then we don't dynamically add them later on at runtime.
Right, because there's
with the current usage of the library, that would work.
I know. So lib process supports this, real dynamic, changing of routes, but in reality, we just set up everything beforehand in most cases, right? So it will seem like a restriction if there's not a way. It's like for like dependency injection, you're like building up the object graph, and there's like endpoint to that. You don't have a way to signal that back to the process. So it sounds like some improvements can be done there.
Yeah, I mean that sounds fine to me. I think that's the issue we saw right now. So I agree that we probably don't have the use case for dynamic routes at the moment. Yeah, I think like returning like file 3 during the initialization and of the lib process sounds good to me.
So one thing in the ticket that doesn't quite make sense to me is that the description says that returning a 404 for a known temporary condition is confusing. But doesn't 404 explicitly state that it may be a temporary condition?
Yeah, I mean, I think the standards say that you can retry when you receive a 404. It does not mean that the resource is actually gone, so it might appear later. So, but what the client's logic is gonna be, like the client either need to retry, but yeah, I think it's very hard to figure out the client logic when you receive a 404. Depends on what kind of API you're exposing. Like for example, if you're doing a remove API and if the remove give you a 404. So right now, okay, so I'll give you some context. So the problem we're trying to solve is for like the remove like nested container API call.
Mm-hmm.
If the container has been removed already, so previously return 404.
Okay.
Now we are thinking about that maybe we should make that remove item potent. So like instead of returning 404 in that case, we return 200 OK, indicating that, so making that remove call like item potent, you can call multiple times to get like 200 OK all the time.
Okay. But that's hard, right? How do you know, unless you keep track of all the things that you've already removed?
No, if you're not found, you return 200 OK. You know for a fact that the container is not there anymore. So the remove will be OK. So you can keep you can keep issuing remove. Like even if you don't got a response, you can say, hey, I reissue the remove and still watch for 200 OK. If I receive a 200 OK, I know that the container has been removed. I can proceed with the rest of the cleanup logic in my client.
Okay, then when do you return 404?
We don't return 404 in that case. Wow. So there's no 404 for like a remove nested container, remove resource provider config, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just make the remove item potent. Similarly, we made the launch item potent. I think it's nice to design those API to be item potent, so the client can just call those if it did not get a response after the timeout. So it's a good it's a good design choice to make those APIs item potent in a distributed system. So that's one way to solve the issue. I think that's kind of what we trying to do for the resource provider config thing. But some of the existing API we cannot change because the backwards compatibility issue. I don't know for sure that if people are relying on this behavior. But I think we should provide some guideline on whenever someone proposes an operator API, how to design that. If we say that, okay, the guideline is like when you design your API, make those calls item potent. And instead of return 404, it should be returned 200 OK if we know for sure that the object is not there. That will be an acceptable way of doing that too. So I'm just like throw out those ideas, like what we can do for. I mean, it's not about the problem I'm trying to solve right now. It's about like what are the potential guidelines I want to provide to folks when designing APIs.
Item potency to me means that you can keep calling the thing without side effects. Now, if the first time it returns 200 and the next time it returns 404, but there's no side effects, sounds like still idempotent, and the client can just recognize that it's 200 and 404 are both good in that case. Right?
Yeah, I mean you can argue that like it's I think like there might be a slightly difference between like true idempotency versus like you can call the call multiple times. There's no side effect, but the return code is different. Like maybe there's a slight difference between these two variants of the idempotency. I guess like for given that issue right now, and I think I think anyway. So I'm just like sure, like we can still return 404, but we have to solve this like file 3 unavailable issue.
So is the issue from the client side, if they get a 404 for container removal, that they're not sure if they specified the right ID or not? Or if we get rid of the, like if we have lib process return 503 during initialization, does that eliminate the issue?
Yeah, that will solve the issue if we return 403 during initialization. So basically, you're saying that in no other circumstances you should Mesos return 404.
Yeah, I think
otherwise it's hard to. Otherwise it's very hard to let the client know like what exactly happened when you receive a 404. It can do nothing basically. Either it has to retry and get a 404 again and don't know what to do next.
Or
I think for 503 is good because think about like when the master is created but hasn't finished recovery yet, then you're going to return 503 within the master, right? So to be consistent and to hide like the details of whether the master is registered but not initialized versus not registered, you should probably return 503.
Yeah, but the reason I think, I agree. Like 503 make that part consistent, but I think that the fact that libproc still return 404 if the route is not found, like say assuming the route can be added dynamically, then we still have a chance to return 404 if your API is actually based on a dynamic routes that some code added later after initialization is done. So that part is not solved yet. Basically, we're saying that we pumped that problem. We don't think that's a problem, a real problem in production, or like people won't hit that issue because we never like have those dynamic routes. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's pretty rare that we use dynamic routes.
Yeah, I mean, if we were really going to if we were going to act as if we don't add dynamic routes at runtime, then it would be suitable for libprocess to return 410 for unknown routes.
Well, libprocess cannot return 410 because routes can be added dynamically. You cannot return 410. 410 means the thing that you know will never come back again.
Right. Well, I guess I'm saying so you're saying you want to leave open the possibility in the future of dynamically adding routes?
Yes, I think like the return 403 solve the stacked routes problem, doesn't solve the dynamic routes problem. We still have the same issues if routes can be added dynamically.
Right. So all I'm suggesting is like maybe there's like an activate call to libprocess to basically activate the endpoint in a semantical sense. That will, and before the activate method is called, it's gonna return you 503. Will that work?
That's not gonna work because I think we also search for example, you're adding a route, like for example, /full/bar, and before you are adding this route, even before you call it like a route to add this route, libprocess is going to give you 404 unless we change that as well.
Well, I think that's what Ian was proposing, right? We would return 503 until...
No, that's initialized. Okay.
Yeah.
What Ian is saying is if, say, the route's being added, but we are not ready yet, like before we calling this activate, we return 503 on that particular route.
No, I mean,
but the route itself might not be found. Like, what do you do in that case?
Oh, I mean, for everything, even if the route is there, it's still going to return you 503 because it's like you're like creating this semantic that the libprocess endpoint, regardless of the routes and actors, it's not ready until you call activate. So if after activate is called, you still cannot find a route, you return 404. But before you call activate, then you return 503 regardlessly.
Yeah, but what if I want to dynamically add in routes after activation? We don't support that.
Will 404 not work in that?
Yeah, it's not going to work because I still cannot distinguish from the case where the API tell me it's 404 because the resource is gone versus the route is not being set up yet because there's a race condition before the route is being set up and the client hitting that endpoint.
So how about formalizing the returned data, like body of 404?
Yeah, that sounds like not ideal. Like I don't want to. Why do I need to parse the body? I mean the whole point of a status code in HTTP is that by using that code, you can program it technically to decide what to do from the client's perspective, not like by parsing the body.
Okay. So in that case, you do want 410, right? So you just then.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the suggestions that give, like, either we say that, okay, when you design in the future, when you design operator API, try to use 410 if you cannot find the resource anymore, so that we can distinguish from the 404, which might be the case where the route is not found. So that's one acceptable answer. Sure.
You just have to remember all of the.
We have to. Yeah, I mean, I don't want like some endpoint return 404 in the not found case and endpoint return like 410 in the not found case. I want to have a consistent error code across the API from Mesos. I understand the fact that we may not be able to change some of the existing APIs, but moving forward, for all the new operator APIs, we need to think through and recommend people to use 410 if it's a not found case.
Well, I guess, I don't understand precisely why 404 wouldn't work if we had an explicit initialization during which we return 503 for everything.
Because routes can be added after initialization dynamically.
Okay.
I think the G's point is that we want a way to distinguish between the cases after initialization. We want to distinguish between the case that the route hasn't been added yet, and the case that the route is being added, but the API handler itself cannot find the target resource.
Okay. I mean, do we need to worry? I guess I'm skeptical that we need to worry that much about the dynamic route adding right now, unless we have concrete plans to start doing that in the near future.
Is the case that the resource providers can register at any point of time after the master is created? So
no, right now it's not a problem because everything is static. So all the API operator API is kind of the agent API, right? So you register those routes in agent.
No.
But yeah, I think even that, I mean, implementation-wise, I think it's not trivial. Like, are you saying that we still use agent to add those routes in the agent actor, and after agent actor finishes initialization, we call some call like the process say activate, so that it will translate that into something that mark the relay process to not return 503 after that point.
Yes.
That to me, implementation-wise, is not. I mean, you can introduce that call. Sure. Okay.
Right. So no, it's like if you want. So the agent actor calling that is probably not appropriate, but you could do so. When you need to choose between things you inject into the agent versus you create within the agent, then you can choose if you want. If you want to make sure the thing is initialized before the agent actor, then you can initialize it in the main method, inject it into the agent, right? So you can then still call activate within the main method.
Yeah, I think that's true. You can say you have some way of initialize routes, and then after this method is finished, in the main function you say activate endpoint, something like this.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's doable. Yeah.
The main method is really a approximation of how people are doing in dependency injection, right?
Yeah, but again, so I think the only downside is it does not handle the dynamic route problem.
So actually, I have a use case that is a little bit related to this dynamic route adding. So one new API we introduced in 1.5 is dynamically adding or removing resource provider configs, and that API is handled by a internal component called resource provider daemon, local resource provider daemon. Initially, when we designed the local resource provider daemon, it's like when we create a daemon, we instantiate all the resource providers. But then we figure out that for the instantiation of the resource provider, we need the agent ID or slave ID. But agent ID can only be obtained after the agent finished the registration or re-registration. So currently, the way we do is I initialize the daemon at agent initialization, but whenever you receive any call, the handler will just reply with bad request until reagent got re-registered and got the ID. I have another special code to tell the daemon itself that now you can serve those things normally. So this is like a little bit related to this dynamic adding route. Although I didn't do that right now, we have the other workaround. But if we have dynamic, we actually can make this dynamic if we want. So this is a use case that we may want to use this dynamic feature, root route adding feature.
Yeah, I think also like there's some tech there around like right now we tie the routes to a lib process actor, which in retrospect is a bad decision. Anyway, yeah, I think right now like since we tie the routes to an actor and we only have one data gate, so basically like if you want to hit like any other actor's route, you have to prefix with the actor name, ID, whatever, like the pit of the actor in the routes itself, so that LibProcess can find what's the actor that can serve this routes.
Right.
So you don't know that route statically. So if you want to design an API, or don't want to use that endpoint.
I have to go, but I just thought it may be worth mentioning. So Ben Mahler actually mentioned this elsewhere in somewhere that so he's thinking about adding. It may make sense to host all of the APIs in their individual actors. So you basically have the API server multiplex and host it separately as a performance improvement, but maybe that's related to this as well.
You mean like the HTTP server itself living within the actor?
Outside of the actor, outside of the, for example, master agent or
don't make master the delegate or make the agent actor the delegate for the lib process. Just make a new actor called like API server.
Right, and you can do like conversion and marshalling of HTTP request and protobuf and do that part of the work outside of the actor, so it becomes multi-threaded if essentially.
Huh.
But yeah, I gotta go. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks for joining, Ian. Bye.
Bye. Okay, what's the action item? What should we do?
Well, it sounds like the next work that will affect this issue is this container removal. Are you looking to update that API?
No, we cannot, because it's a stable API that we cannot change the API semantics.
So are you just looking to establish a convention going forward?
Yes, for any new ones.
Mm-hmm.
That we should be consistent.
So I think that the two concrete proposals I've heard are, one, to have a discrete initialization phase during which libprocess would return 503, and the other would be to have API endpoints return a 410 when the resource is not found. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and there's a third option, which is like try to make the endpoint, like the API idempotent and return 200 OK if you are trying to remove something that does not exist. These are the three options.
Okay, so the third option, does that cover, I mean, it makes sense in terms of the container removal case. Does that?
If Perl doesn't cover all the cases. Yeah, if Perl doesn't cover all the cases, for example, when you do a get and you cannot find the object. We don't have a get right now, but hypothetically, let's assume that you want to get some resources within an identifier, and somehow the API handler cannot find that resource. What do you return in that case?
Well, instead of get, maybe we can establish a convention that we always provide a list everything function. Then we can then this can be.
Yeah, I think that's something that that's a good point. So maybe like we don't allow get. The way you can get is by doing a list. Well, I guess the argument against like having asking every API to have a list is lists might be expensive, and sometimes you don't want to get all the objects. You want to just get particular objects and to test the existence of an object.
And we can have a filter on that.
Yeah, filter, but that's pretty cumbersome to use that API, right? So
yeah, I mean, I feel like you could design a get call such that it returns the item you request or an empty list, perhaps with 200 OK, if it's not there.
Yeah, or return like 210, 410. That's also acceptable.
Yeah, 410 might work in that case as well, actually.
For 410, I think someone, I forgot who, like raised a concern about this because like 410 means it's there, it's already gone and never will appear.
Yeah.
So if the API doesn't have that semantics, then it's probably not a perfect fit.
Yeah, it would be a bit awkward to use that. Like, if anything, with the current code base, it makes more sense to use 410 when the route isn't found and 404 when a particular resource isn't found. But if we want to leave open the possibility of dynamic route adding in the future, 404 seems to make sense for both cases.
Okay, maybe we'll say that this is case by case, maybe. And given that we need to do API review in this forum and for any new API that we can add into Mesos, maybe we can keep that in mind. And whenever someone proposes some new APIs, this is the first checklist we need to do to make sure that the client can actually distinguish between like cases.
Yeah, one thing that's occurring to me right now, so we're talking about establishing a convention for new API changes. I don't think we really have a repository for information like that, like an API design guide or something like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be a good document to start.
Yeah, I think I would rather wait until we design this gRPC ones. Like if you want to move forward with gRPC, we should definitely add those because gRPC has error code too. And we need to figure out in which circumstance we return which error code. And then we have to figure out that. I'd rather in fact, I would rather wait for that because I think right now, even if we say something, it's going to only apply to some new APIs and we cannot change the old APIs. So when we design V2, I think we can start that doc and put those kind of guidelines so that everything is consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure for gRPC, we're going to have the same debate because gRPC has a bunch of similar error code, similar to HTTP status that people need to map to different situations. And the client will base on those error code to do different error handling and retry or not retry, things like this.
A fourth option that may seem a little hacky right now could be that the 404 return by the process is like empty 404, and we probably require the API when they return 404, they need to have a content body. This sounds hacky right now, but I remember I seen something similar in the code base. I forgot where.
Yeah, but that's very hard to explain to the client, right? Most of the client don't want to deal with that level of details. Like, why do I need to like kind of parse the body to be able to tell?
Yeah, but you don't need to parse the body. You need to just see if the body.
Yeah, why do I need to do that? It's hard to explain, right? It's not intuitive as just the status code.
Yeah, I'm suggesting this because I remember there's something there.
Yeah, I guess it will be less in the issue for gRPC because gRPC has this, not just the error code, also we have the error details that we can encode some structured information there. So it probably be less in the issue in gRPC world where we can actually encode some structured information and define the type of that structured information.
Yeah, so I guess given the options that have been proposed thus far, I'm not really sure which one seems best. They're all not totally ideal. Do you guys think this warrants what's the best forum to try to reach consensus on this? Is it this working group or an email thread?
Yeah, so I would suggest that every new API, let's discuss that case. We keep in mind that there's an issue regarding 404, and every time people propose some new API in this forum, we need to look into each individual API and make sure they can handle the case and provide some semantic the client can actually use. I mean, that's the best we can do right now. Like for example, the one we decide to do for resource provider config removal thing is trying to return 200 OK, which is totally acceptable because now you can distinguish between route is not set up versus the resource has been removed already, and 200 OK make the call a true idempotent API call, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so in that case, the call is really like a 200 OK indicates that that resource no longer exists.
Yes. Right. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so we can, I think that sounds okay for now. We don't have like a general consensus on an overarching policy, so we can do it case by case. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then revisit this once we design the gRPC one.
Cool.
And try to make that consistent. I think right now, either way, it's not going to be consistent because there's some API that we cannot change anyway. And we should discuss each API case by case and see if we have this issue. I think that's my suggestion. I don't think we can do anything right now to fix everything.
Cool. Okay. So the next item, unless anybody has anything else on that topic, anybody? Nope. Okay. The next item on the agenda, I put this on, this task deadline proposal that had been brought up on the mailing list. I know Zhitao was not able to make this meeting, and I didn't reach out to any, I think James Peach, is shepherding this. So it might actually make sense for me to just bring this up on the email thread on the mailing list. I'm not sure how much context folks have here around this issue. But I think my primary question, just high-level question I was having was why it's worth adding this to Mesos rather than just letting schedulers take care of this in their own logic. Does anyone in the meeting right now have any context on this, or should I just take it to the mailing list?
I think I briefly went through the thread, but haven't thought about it yet.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just reply on the thread and sync with Zhitao and James on that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, just a reminder to folks that I created this ticket for tracking tech debt related to V2 API, like things that we want to make sure we address in the V2 API or things that we need to do before we'll be ready to transition and implement V2. So just a reminder that this ticket exists, Mesos 8700. If you know of any issues along those lines or create any in the future, you can add them to this epic to track them.
In fact, we should drag this 410 ticket into that epic.
Which ticket?
The first one, like 7697.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Let's just drag that under that epic.
Yep.
And that's a good way to keep track of this issue when we design the V2 thing.
Oh, this one is already in an epic.
Well, that's the thing we cannot fix, can we?
What do you mean?
I guess we can fix, I mean, you can only do that if you change the response to 503 when doing initialization. But if you want to do any other option, you cannot do that because it will break the API backwards compatibility.
We can duplicate this ticket, right?
Yeah, maybe create a new one, like have a guideline for in general when should we return not found versus gone, or like be idempotent.
I will create that. Okay, and that's all that I had for today. Does anybody else have items they want to bring up?
No?
Anybody? Oh, Gaston, you're on the call. About the operation reconciliation stuff. I wonder if this HTTP return code discussion is relevant to that at all.
I don't think so, because we will return a response if the handler is already installed. And in that case, if an unknown operation is passed, then we will return an operation unknown.
So do we just return 210 accepted for any valid request then?
For reconciliation, we return a 200 and a response.
Yeah. So, so you would get a 200 OK response with an update that says operation unknown.
Yeah, you would get the reconciliation response, and then inside you would get a repeated operations object. And for the operation that is not found, you will get an unknown. So there's no 404 or anything like that there. You will always get a 200 if the handler is installed.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Nope. Okay, well, thanks for joining today, everybody. Appreciate the discussion. I'll take on my action items, and next meeting happens in 2 weeks. Let me know if there's anything interesting you want to add to the agenda, anything you want to talk about, and I'll send out an email before the next meeting. Thanks for joining, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.